Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Last week, I did a budget challenge where I purchased food for 2 weeks for one person, and my grocery haul came in at $1.15 a day. My plan, as always, was to use basic pantry staples like oil and dry spices to use to make some delicious meals with those ingredients. In this week's video, I'm going to show you some of the meals I made this week. And just a disclaimer, this is an emergency budget only. It is not possible to get enough nutrition on $1 a day. However, I will say it will be delicious and it will be filling. Today I'm making French onion soup, but I am going to modify this to match our ingredients. I'm going to start out by cutting up some of the onion. If you remember, I got a yellow onion for 17 cents. And I think normally you would use the entire onion in this soup. If you were making a big pot of this, you might even use 3 or 4 onions. I think that this is going to be plenty. I'm wanting to make about 3 or 4 servings. There were only a few recipes that I really needed to have this onion for. So I'm just trying to make it last for my menu, just for those recipes that I want to make. And of course you can save all the peels from the vegetables and make your own stock with these as well. I'm going to go ahead and get started by caramelizing my onions, and this is a process that is best done low and slow. So I'm going to turn this temperature down quite low. If you try to go too fast, you're going to burn the onions and it's going to become bitter. But if we just take our time, we'll end up getting a very sweet onion that is caramelized, and it's going to add such great flavor to this dish. Yellow onions are the best kind of onions to use for onion soup because they have an intensity and depth of flavor that white onions do not. White onions are very mild, and I'm sure they would work and it would taste good, but yellow is the best, and fortunately, yellow is the cheapest. Since we have onions and I have a tiny amount of this carrot, I'll use that. And then we have a plentiful amount of potatoes. So I thought I would also cut up a potato and use in that just to make it a little more filling. I do suggest using a bouillon. You can use whatever you like here, whether that be a beef bouillon, which is frequently used with a French onion soup, but you can also use chicken, or in my case, I'm going to use a vegetable bouillon. You're going to want to cook the flour for a few minutes before you add in your broth, just like you would do if you were making gravy. Obviously, if you want to add in water and then add the teaspoons of bouillon, you can do that as well. It really doesn't matter. And as you're stirring it, you can see that your soup starts to thicken up and get kind of creamy at the same time. Now is when you can taste it and see if you need to add any more bouillon. And then you're going to go ahead and add in the potatoes. I had started cooking these potatoes in boiling water for a different recipe, but then I just decided to use them here. But they can be raw when you add them in because you're going to be simmering this for a while anyway. And then you're going to also add in a bay leaf, and I added 2, and then add in some thyme if you like both of those spices. If you don't, then obviously just omit them, but those are items that are typically found in French onion soup. And then we're going to just let this simmer for a bit to develop those flavors, and then our soup is going to be done. And there are so many ways that you can modify this soup based on the ingredients that you have on hand. Here's the casserole dish that I'm going to use. It's got some depth for the soup, and I think it's big enough for 3 to 4 serving sizes. And here's the bread that I got from Walmart. This was $1. If you remember, I got the Italian loaf, and I got the pre-sliced, and I think this is going to work out perfect, but I think I'll go ahead and place it in my pan just to see before I toast the bread. And that way I can cut it before I brown the bread. And I think this is perfect. You could just toast this in your toaster if you wanted to, but by cooking it in the oven, I'm only going to be cooking one side of it. You could also go ahead and scrape a side of this with raw garlic clove, and that would taste good, but I'm just going to sprinkle a tiny amount of garlic salt, not too much, because there already is sodium in the dish. And then I just put that in the oven under the broiler. And here is the level of brown that I got this to. Again, it's crispy on one side and not on the other. This smells delicious. But I do need to take out the bay leaves. And because I'm going to be adding cheese to the top of the bread, I'm just going to give the sides a quick spray. Obviously, you can just brush the oil on the sides if you have a brush, or even use a piece of towel to do that. But I have the spray, so I'm just using that. I'm using this Fiesta blend because this is what I purchased for our budget grocery haul last week, but you can really use any cheese that you want or have in the house. Gruyere is the typical cheese used for this, but you can also use Swiss cheese, pretty much anything that you have on hand. And I also added a tiny amount of mozzarella that I had left over. And then at first I covered it so all the cheese would melt. And then I took the top off and I let it broil for a little while until it looked like this. I chose to serve it in this wide bowl that had a little bit of depth to it, but not as much as a regular bowl. Adding the bread is going to make this a much more filling meal. And also the potatoes that we added in there. And then I went ahead and dished up this piece of bread. Just wanted to know what this is going to taste like without the cheese on there, just in case someone couldn't afford to have the cheese. And also some people don't eat cheese anyway. And then just to give it some color, I'm adding a small amount of the cilantro. Actually, the first bite, I want to try these onions. Those are fabulous. They're sweet and so flavorful. And then this, it was gooey, it was chewy. The bread is actually, I think it's the right depth of that bread. So I'm glad I got the sliced bread. It just made this recipe a lot easier. This is definitely a 10 for me with that cheese. And now I want to try the bread without the cheese and let you know what I think of this. If you do like this video, I hope you'll consider giving it a like and sharing it or subscribing. It does help my channel and it allows me to make more content like this. It is still a bit chewy, not as much. It doesn't have as good of a texture. So I'm going to say this is a 10 with the cheese, and without it, I'm going to say it's about an 8.5. So you could make this with or without it and it would still be a delicious meal. This broth is to die for. I mean, this is one of those soups probably going to be on my radar every winter from here on out. I'm surprised it's taken me this long to make this soup. It is so good. And I do love the cheese. I would love to try this with Gruyere. For people that live alone, you could just put a pot of this in the fridge and then bring it out, heat it up, put the toast over it along with a piece of cheese, and then this would be some easy weeknight meals. And this one that I'm showing here, I actually tried a vegan cheese for the very first time. Obviously that does break the $1 a day budget, but just wanted to put that out there in case anyone needs the modification. It wasn't as good as the real cheese, but it was still really good. And then I had made a pot of kidney beans with the supplies that I had purchased in the grocery haul. And this was some of the salsa verde that was left over from last week, which was also a green enchilada sauce that I used. And I also made these pickled jalapenos with carrots and onions. And it's amazing how just making one condiment can help to pull your meals together. And this cilantro was, of course, from the haul as well. This is my favorite kind of breakfast. It has everything that I want. It's got protein and fiber with the beans. It's got the potatoes, which are filling, and onions. And then I use a little bit of that tomatillo mixture to give it a little bit of acidity. And the single slice of jalapeno just added some great flavor, but it doesn't have any heat in it. So yeah, I love this. I ate all of these and I'm looking forward to eating these again. You could have a super fast breakfast by having all items in the fridge and then just fry up your shells in the morning and load your tacos. Next up, I'm gonna make a French rice salad. This has been on my bucket list for a while now. And the weather is actually kind of warm today here in Southern California. So I thought that this would hit the spot. I've got these kidney beans. I've got plenty of rice. Actually, I still have the other half of this bag. I have these green beans, and I actually had this recipe in mind when I purchased those. I'm going to be using a small clove of my garlic, and then I'll also be using this piece of carrot. I figured I would use just a few of the leaves from this spinach just to give the salad a little more color. And I'm saving the rest for a soup. Usually I just use a rice cooker for my rice, but I have been exploring other cultures and different ways of making rice. And today I'm going to cook it like I would a pasta. First, I rinsed my rice and cleaned it thoroughly. And then I'm just going to boil it for about 9 minutes until it's just slightly al dente. And then I'm going to pull it off and I'm going to run it under cold water just to stop the cooking process. And then I'll let it sit out and drain. I cut up my vegetables into bite-sized pieces. And then I went ahead and part-boiled the green beans. I wanted them to still be crispy, so I only let them boil for a couple minutes and then I ran them in cold water. And then I wanted to chiffonade the spinach. The only time I chiffonade, which means cutting it into little strips, is when I'm cutting basil or spinach. And cutting your items into smaller pieces always makes them look like more. And I do think that this is going to give some beautiful color to the salad, even though spinach really doesn't have any flavor. I'm going to be adding about half of my garlic here. This is raw garlic. This is going to be too much for many of you. If you don't like the taste of raw garlic, then simply omit this step. If you have shallots, you could add in some chopped shallots. You could also add in a little bit of garlic powder instead, just a tiny amount, and then add in some vinegar. And you're also going to want to add in some oil, whatever the best kind of oil that you have is. I used a white wine vinegar, but if you have an apple cider vinegar, that works. Pretty much anything that you have is going to work here. And then I also added some salt and pepper, and I did want to add some herbs in here. So I looked in my pantry to see what I might want in this, and I do love basil. So I added some of that along with some thyme. And then just some oregano. And I just wanted a light touch of dill. If you have some Dijon mustard, go ahead and add about 1 to 2 teaspoons. Although I don't think most people would have that in their pantry staples, so I'm not going to add that in. The mustard is great as an emulsifier for dressings, and it does add a little flavor, but I don't think we're going to miss it too much in this recipe. So go ahead and give this a taste, and I think it's perfect. If it's not acidic enough for you, then add a little more vinegar. If it's too acidic, add a little more oil to it. And I'm sure that there are people out there that probably add a little honey or maple syrup or sugar to it, but The original recipe that I'm kind of going off of, which actually wasn't a recipe at all, I just saw somebody make this, but they didn't have any sugar in it. So anyway, I'm adding a small amount of the kidney beans, some corn, and the carrots. The carrots are going to give it a nice crunch. I think ideally I would have cooked my rice about 1 minute less. I made a tiny sample size of this recipe first to make sure I would like this, and I made the rice perfect the first go around. But I was busy filming and I think I let this go an extra minute too long. But I think pretty much anything you could add in here would be good. Whatever leftover ingredients you have, I think zucchini would be good. Lots and lots of different things. They did put a few olives in, I do remember that, but we don't have that. They also added red peppers and tomatoes. And then I added in the parboiled green beans. Those still have some crunch to them as well. I also have the cilantro, but I decided not to add it here because even though it would give it a nice fresh flavor, which I think I'll try with the leftover salad. But first I'm going to try it like this. Another thing that you can do is you can use that dressing for a potato salad. That would be delicious. Also, you could try adding a can of tuna to this and make a niçoise salad. That would be delicious, and I think that dressing would go great with it. Okay, as far as this rice salad goes, I'm actually shocked how much I like this. To start out with, I love the texture of this rice. It is light and it's fluffy, and it has just the right amount of vinegar flavoring in this with the herbs. I wanted to try this recipe because it's centered on rice, which is very inexpensive. And then the other ingredients can be just items that you might already have in your pantry or items that are on sale. I do want to try this with olives sometime. I did add in some of the pickled onions, and I thought that that was delicious as well. There are lots more dishes I could have made with these ingredients. I could have made a Spanish rice like I made in this video. I also could have added some cheese to the top. I also could have used the onions to make a basic onion gravy and then poured that over the rice along with some lentils and fried onions, and that would have been a great meal. Or of course, you could just use bouillon to help make your gravy. Whatever favorite bouillon that you have. I've basically used them all. Beef, chicken, vegetable, they all make a great gravy. I also had plenty of bread, so I could have toasted that and poured the gravy over the bread. Another thing that I was thinking about doing with all of these potatoes is to make some baked potato skins. I made these a while back and they turned out so good, where I cut them in half and I baked them like this along with some garlic salt and a little oil, and they turned out perfect. They were nice and crispy, and I always thought I would like to continue to use that method, especially if I'm going to be filling it with something. I just scooped a small amount of the potato mixture out of the middle, and they turned out so nice and crispy around the edges and also on the bottoms. And the last time I made these, I made like a spicy lentil mixture for these, and I had plenty of ingredients for that. I had also thought about possibly making like a chili, but I just didn't end up getting to it. But I thought that would be great. And then of course you could also do a little appetizer. If you wanted to use a small amount of the cheese, you could make baked potato skins as well. And then for my final recipe, I wanted to show you a delicious soup that I was able to make with these lentils. If you remember, I was so excited to be able to pick up this ginger root for 4 cents at the store because I knew I would be able to make a delicious base for a soup with that ginger and garlic clove that I purchased. I spent 64 cents on this head of garlic at Walmart, but I do feel like I've gotten so much use out of this garlic clove. It has helped season so many of my meals, and it made an excellent enchilada sauce for those spinach enchiladas that I made in the last video. So to start out with, you cut up a small amount of the ginger and about 2 small cloves of garlic. And it's funny because I actually don't like raw ginger. It's too spicy, but when you cook it in this soup, it's very mild and you can't taste any of that heat. It just gives a nice flavor. So I just lightly cook the ginger and garlic. Make sure you don't burn the garlic or it will be bitter. Just lightly saute it for a few minutes and then add in the water. Then you're going to add in some diced potatoes, and those have been rinsed to get all the starch off of those. And then I add in some lentils, and those have already been cleaned as well. Then I'm going to add in my salt and some turmeric, and the salt is just going to be a season to taste situation. Same thing with the pepper. Just add the amount that you want. And this is one of my favorite soups to make. I prefer in the winter months to eat some kind of variation of this at least a couple days a week. I enjoy taking this on my lunch. If you remember, I was so excited to be able to score spinach on sale this week when I did this challenge. But for this particular recipe, you just want to do a rough cut of the spinach, of basically of the amount that you want to add to this. And I did film this soup earlier in the winter, so I probably wouldn't have added this much spinach to the soup, but probably about half of that would be the amount that I would have added in. But I do enjoy spinach in my soup, which sometimes is kale. It just depends on whatever's on sale, but I do like to have a green in it. And that's pretty much the basis of the soup. It is super delicious, just like this. And then I could have taken a couple of pieces of toasted bread. And then here's another variation of this soup that I made one time. This, I think, has red lentils. And also, I think I cut up Aroma tomato that I needed to use. And then this one also has kale in it instead. But it's basically the same soup. I just swap out whatever ingredients I have on hand for this, and it turns out delicious every time, just with that small amount of garlic and ginger. Thanks so much for watching my video, friends. I'll see you next week.
Morning has broken, my windows are open. Wanna feel the wind blow through my hair. Which way do I follow? What happens tomorrow? I turn to you and hope you can guide the way. Sometimes I give up, just wanna be on